Today's latest jobs report is proof again of a labor market that has been resilient and often stronger than expected. That was part of President Biden's message during his State of the Union last night as well. But many Americans don't feel the economy is strong overall or helping them or their families.
Did you know that the average US worker has to choose between credit card bills and rent payments? This is the economic condition of the US, and it's only about to get worse. American corporate greed has always destroyed and created lives and livelihoods. But in recent years, capitalism and its long arms have significantly increased their reach. Average earnings haven't been able to keep up with the inflation, and the middle class in America has had to cut corners and often sleep in the empty stomach. The picture is grim, and more so because the prices rise and inflation looms. The upper middle class and rich have only benefited from it. The top 1% is a term we hear very frequently, but have you ever given a thought to why they are called so? It is because they possess an astonishingly huge portion of the nation's and the country's wealth, amounting to enormous portions of the country's GDP. It is safe to say that while they have only increased and grown their wealth, the poor have been squeezed to the limit. When prices rise, wages often don't, and the middle class and people with low income have to make do with what they earn. Government policy lapses and corruption of private entities have been the core of this issue. In simple terms, these lapses do increase the wealth inequality, but there are more factors to play. We will slowly examine these factors and dissect the crisis and its causes. When older individuals pass on generational wealth to their children, they often pay nothing in terms of inheritance tax. However, the children born in such families not only benefit from such huge wealth but also use it to generate more revenue. This is called the capital gains, and while the latter income is taxable under the capital gains tax, the former often isn't. This leads to amassing huge amounts of generational wealth in some families. While this doesn't sound so horrible, and most people often depend on the money inherited from their parents, what bothers one is the fact that people with low incomes can't quite operate the same way. They often have to perform backbreaking work for little or no money, spending lump sums on education to secure useless degrees that don't guarantee jobs. Education in the USA is now a privilege, and the wage and wealth gap is taking America from being a first world to a third world country. The lack of rich parents and their saving often creates boundless gaps in wealth that take generations to bridge. The fraudulent taxation system in the US is designed to operate for the rich, by the rich, and for the rich. Children and youngsters often do not have to wait for the passing of their elderly relatives. A concept called giving while living allows them to provide benefits for their children through various methods, such as property purchases and repeated tax-free cash transfer for estate money. These systems often allow them to either evade or maximize tax while operating, worsening the gap. The top 1%, which holds about as much wealth as the bottom 90% is the predominantly white, will dictate the broadcast share of the money flow. In 1980, the bottom half of the income distribution received about 20% of the national income. By 2014, that share had declined to 12%. Average pre-tax income for the bottom 50% of the income distribution has stagnated since 1980 at some $16,000 per adult per year, and the income of the top 1% of the distribution has increased sharply. In 1980, adults in the top 1% averaged 27 times the income of those at the bottom 50%. Today, they average 81 times that income. At the core of this phenomenon is the rise of income through investments rather than through direct wage income or salaries. The influx of women into the workforce has helped limit inequality. However, after 1980, the bottom 90% of the US population saw a small 0.8% growth in their wealth per year. That still lags behind the average income growth of 1.4% a year and stands in contrast to the 1946 to 1980 period, when the bottom 90%'s income grew about 2% per year. This shows that post-1980, the wealth of the average and middle-class American has stagnated significantly. The government has repeatedly resorted to the distribution of freebies and benefits to people experiencing poverty. This includes unemployment grants and pays, but study shows that this has only mildly offset the inequality in income. In 1980, the bottom half received about 20% of national income. By 2014, their share had declined to 12%. For the top 1%, the picture is exactly the reverse. In 1980, they received 12% of national income. In 2014, they received 20%. Social welfare schemes and social security programs have only benefited older people and the middle class. The lower middle class and poor, especially those at the bottom of the economic ladder, have not been helped much by these government measures. Many of these peoples include daily wage workers and manual laborers, who are often forced to work under extreme and dangerous conditions for longer hours. They receive low pay and often get exploited because the people they work for have money and can bend the rules. Social disparity and racial or gender issues also affect how well one can receive work and pay. Do you think the disparity is limited to wealth? An extremely rich politician does not have the same power as a middle-class wage worker. The former has significantly greater control over the economy and its functionaries. They can exert such control through monetary, political, or social means when they feel they need to do so. Wealthier individuals can use their property and existing wealth to generate more wealth. Growing money from money is a very simple concept. As someone who owns multiple properties can rent the space out, they can collect rent from multiple people by essentially doing little to no direct labor. he can easily invest wealth in the form of money or estate to reap investment in return. Such free wealth in the free economy can ruin the prospect of those who do not have access to these resources. This is the condition of the bottom 90% in America. As they work hard to save and retire, prices will keep rising. They will continue to fight a never-ending battle with inflation that will keep them in their toes forever. The top 1% can also use their wealth to control the bottom 90%. They often tend to control salaries and wages in businesses run by them, the working condition of those workers, and the standards of safety and equipment available to them. In short, the system that runs the economy, including the government, private sector establishments, and the top 1% of the population, has complete and absolute control over the lives of the bottom 90%. This includes the economic prospect and social condition. Does this really look like a free market to you? However, in the 1950s, rich Americans faced tax rates as high as 90% of their income. But today, in 2024, wealthy married couples can exempt themselves from as much as $27 million worth of taxes. And America's rich are doing everything to keep the money rolling. 50 billionaire families have already injected more than $600 million collectively into the crucial 2024 US elections, with that number sure to increase significantly in the final 6 months of the campaign. This is proof of the fact that the nation's richest family consider democracy just another commodity they can buy. Does this level of entitlement seem fair to you? This interaction ends with the seller of democracy sitting on Congress, passing more laws that benefits the rich by cutting taxes and, in some cases, helping them evade taxes completely. In a recent private event, the former US President Donald Trump asked oil industry executive to raise $1 billion for his campaign, and raising such a sum would be a good deal for them, given how much money they would save if he were re-elected as president. At another event with deep pocket donors, held at New York's luxurious Pier Hotel, Trump reminded all present that a re-elected Joe Biden would lead Trump's 2017 tax cuts for the rich end at the end of the 2025.
My predecessor rolled back protection for American workers. He opposed increases in federal minimum wage, and he was proud, very proud of his $2 trillion tax cut when he was president that overwhelmingly benefited the wealthy and created the biggest corporations and exploded the federal debt. I cut the federal deficit. He exploded it.
He warned them that they were going to see the biggest tax increase in history. With such politicians at the helm of legislation, the future of tax policy and wealth redistribution seems bleak at best. There are several dark corridors through which people with deep pockets advance donations to the political class. This needs to be stopped. This helps the donors and the receivers remain secret. This is often mediated through non-profit organizations, which advance donations to people who are friendly with the politicians themselves. The non-profits themselves do not disclose the identity of the people involved. The only method that might work is aggressive tax policies that redistribute wealth. But as long as the entire political class in the US seeks to line their pockets and retain power, it seems unlikely that US workers will get any respite. Such astonishing disparity in wealth might lead to a revolution. Even when the consequences aren't that drastic, social and economic disparity leads to increased crime rates and social insecurity. For the greater good of American society, changes are mandatory. Do let us know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more.